Good morning, dear friends. I want to thank everybody who joins us, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Ukraine Media Center. Today it's been 14 years of the year. It's been 4 years of the full-scale invasion of homeland by Russian aggressor. And today we have invited you to discuss the negotiations between aggressor and the United States on ceasefire in Ukraine. So we will be discussing the analysis of the negotiation processes, territorial claims of the aggressor, and their political dimension. This is the topic of our today's conversation, and we're going to be discussing it with Vadym Denysenko, head of the Dilova Stolytsia Analytical Center. Good morning, Vadym. Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I want to thank everybody who joined us. So basically, as we talk about the negotiations going on currently between the United States and Russian Federation, probably European Union may join those negotiations, and Ukraine will most likely join. So the main principle of American diplomacy that was back in the day shaped by Henry Kissinger is that diplomacy doesn't solve problems. Diplomacy can only solve one thing. It's supposed to achieve the balance of big systems that are supposed to basically get balanced. So that peace was never a purpose of American diplomacy. The balance was. So as we analyze everything going on now, we have to see all the events through the prism of this principle and non-systemic nature of Donald Trump. And the balance of big systems is the foundation of everything that we call American diplomacy today. In order to understand what may happen, we have to understand the way Ukrainian and Russian societies are structured. When it comes to Russian society, I operate with the figures that we study in our Dilova Stolytsia Analytical Center, a new image group sociological company. We do sociology studies in Russian Federation. Those are our figures, and basically all of the figures that I'm going to mention are a part of our surveys. So talking about Russian society, we have to understand that 65% of the Russians think that victory at the front line borders and absence of Ukrainian claims to join NATO. The Russians want to end this war, and they really want the front line to stop where it currently is, and that will be enough for them to say, we won. However, there are also 25% of ultra-patriots in the Russian Federation who want to continue waging the war until the full destruction of Ukraine and Ukrainians, not only the state of Ukraine, but Ukrainians as the nation. And basically, we have a huge problem. Putin relies on those 25%. He relies on that ultra-patriotic minority, and he is quite dependent on the way those people think and will think in the future. So what's the problem? If the war stops tomorrow, those people, those 25%, basically 1 in 4 Russians de facto will switch to opposition against Vladimir Putin. Definitely that's not going to be aggressive opposition with manifestations against Putin, but that will be a kitchen-based opposition who will murmur and on the background of Russian economy. Russian economy is currently in quite a complicated state. Well, all of those events may result in certain social protests that may transform into political protests. So basically, this is the biggest fear of Kremlin to stop the war. If we don't take into account the main psychological factor, the factor of Putin himself, who set his goals in 2022 and was unable to achieve any of them. Let me remind you that the main reasons of the full-scale invasion were as follows. Putin was thinking that the blitzkrieg in Ukraine will make him the third pole of the world. He was thinking that his blitzkrieg will allow him to bring back unlimited police functionality in the post-Soviet space. And then he was thinking that his blitzkrieg will help him stop the Slavization of Russian Federation. And none of those three factors was achieved. And won't be achieved no matter how the war ends. So talking about Ukrainian society, the situation is pretty similar to what's in the heads of the Russians. About 60% of the Ukrainians wants to stop the war in the front line without recognition of annexation, so that's definitely a red line for Ukrainians. And about 30% think that the war should continue. So basically we have this internal situation, 1/3 against 2/3. 2/3 are ready to stop the war, meanwhile 1/3 is not ready for that. In this case, unlike the Russians, those 30%, just like 60%, may or may not be a part of the protests. Because unlike Russians, Ukrainians have more potential to the protests at any phase of political process. Now, talking about the economy of Russian Federation, that we cannot omit when we discuss what Putin can and cannot do. The situation in Russian economy, in brief, is pre-recession. If everything goes in the way it's going now, starting from the next year, with a high degree of probability, we may say that Russian economy will enter recession. The deficit budget after 7 months is 4,879 billion rubles. They were thinking that the deficit will amount to a little bit more than 2 trillion, but then in the middle of the year, they changed the forecast to almost 5 trillion rubles. Only within the month of July, the deficit was 1.2 trillion rubles. Upon the 7th month of the last year, the cost, the expenditures of the Russians changed 25%. The amount of liquid assets in the foundation of national well-being was about 4 trillion years after 7 months of the year 2025. So if this fund doesn't get exhausted by the end of the year, it will definitely be smaller than currently. So basically, it will almost be liquidated. Also, we need to understand that officially Russians have started, one way or another, on the official level, they've started discussing that there are huge risks of recession and there are significant problems with Russian economy and the risk to enter recession in the year 2026. Peskov was saying it, Central Bank was saying it, and the Analytical Center, headed by the brother of the incumbent Minister of Defense Belosov, is saying the same. So this is the diagram for better visibility. This is the growth of servicing of the Russian state debt and exempt loans that were extended against mortgages, which is a burden for Russian budget for the time being. In 2025, they amounted to 14% of all of the budget expenses. Also, another important indicator is closing of small and medium-sized business. For the first time since the default in the year 2008, we may say that the number of closed companies versus the opened ones is 2 to 1. 141,000 against 95,000 open. 941 closed against 95,000 open. At the same time, more important companies that account for manufacturing or that account for 4% of Russian GDP switched to 4 years working week. All of the vehicle factories, a number of cement factories, Roselmash, one of the biggest manufacturers of agricultural machinery. And when we say KAMAZ, we don't only mean one factory in Naberezhny Chelny. That's a whole chain of 20 to 30 companies that are in the supply chain. And the most complicated situation in the Russian economy is in coal industry, first of all, and Kuzbas in particular. For the time being, thanks to government investments, they keep this region afloat, but it's in the biggest risk in the perspective of social explosion, because as soon as the state budget payments will stop, there will be a mass retirement and mass closing of coal mines in Kuzbas. About 50 coal companies are currently either closed or are just kept afloat thanks to budget payments. As soon as those budget payments end, they will be closed too. Basically, it's important to take a look at the budget of Russian Federation. The first thing we may say that the national project funding was cut in the first quarter of 2025. 17 federal projects out of 110 didn't get any funding whatsoever. So basically 1 in 5 didn't get any. The gas price has been growing within the last 5 months, and currently the export of gas from Russian Federation is closed. There is significant growth of prices for food, and for the first time since 2021, the purchasing parity of the Russians started falling, because the version saying that the Russians started saving, well, it's directly related to the fact that people are confident about the day to come. And basically now the budget cuts are officially announced. I'm considering the Russian economy for such an extended period due to some significant reasons. Starting from the year 2022, Russian budget that is being put together for 3 years was contemplating drastic changes of cuts for military industry and everything related to the war. Currently, Putin is facing a huge dilemma. He either needs to increase the spending for army and war, and to cut the funding for national projects and infrastructure funding programs that may result in man-made catastrophes, and a number of social programs, or otherwise don't expand war funding, keep it at the current level, and to keep the funding of the infrastructure and social projects at the current level. We don't know what's going to be his decision, but he's definitely facing this problem, and there is no good answer. Both answers are bad. If you reduce funding for the military industry, everything that was giving rise to economy is falling. If you spend more money for the war, it will result in problems in a number of regions, in the number of industries that are currently surviving only thanks to the budget exemptions, starting from AvtoVAZ and ending with coal industry. So this is the biggest economic dilemma that Putin is going to face within a couple of months to come, and a lot will depend on the way the circumstances are going to unfold in 2026. If there's going to be no agreement in the meeting that is about to happen shortly. So talking about the negotiations, and what's mostly discussed is the matter of the borders. We don't know for the time being what is the position the United States are going to take after all those leaks of Witkoff's statements that he was ready to give Russia all of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions in exchange for the Russian troops to withdraw a couple of villages of the Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, and Kharkiv regions. For the time being, for all I understand, there was intense information campaign inside the United States, and most likely the position of the United States will be that the border is the front line. But no matter the circumstances, we have to understand that neither Ukraine nor Russia are going to change the constitution. Obviously, we have all those regions in our constitution. We're not going to withdraw it. At the same time, Russian constitution lists 5 of Ukrainian regions as the territory of Russia: the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, and Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia regions. So under no circumstances, no one is going to change the constitution, just like it's going to happen in Armenia or Azerbaijan is not the case for Ukraine and Russia. And that's going to be one of the factors that is going to trigger a significant number of Ukrainians and Russians during the discussion of what's going to happen or what's not going to happen in Alaska. Another key issue is lifting of sanctions. For the time being, it's not discussed, almost not discussed in Ukraine, but from my point of view, it may be even more important for Putin rather than the matter of borders, because he is going to be able to explain everything about the borders to his population, but lifting of sanctions is the matter of survival of Russian economy. For the time being, we know that Russian Federation, to a certain extent, will still defend the formula of lifting of sanctions that was suggested in area 3 months ago, the Dmitriev formula. And the essence of this formula is that the American companies may enter the north of Russian Federation. They enter the oil mining industry, and not only oil mining industry, different resources mining. But at the same time, the so-called commodity homes will be created that will sell sanctioned products under American flag in the territory of European Union and so-called unfriendly states. And basically, for the time being, we may understand that this formula doesn't satisfy European Union and is hardly viable at this moment. So I think now what's discussed is how to make this formula such that would satisfy European Union as well. And let me repeat myself once again, from my perspective, it's a key matter for Putin. It may be even more important than the borders, because without lifting sanctions, Russian economy in 2026 will fall into recession with all relevant consequences. Basically, I'm confident that the Russians may also touch upon 3 issues. Ukraine not joining NATO. I think there is consensus between United States and Europe that Ukraine will not join NATO in any short or medium-term perspective. Also, Russians will demand the amendment of language and confession legislation. They will insist on making Russian an official language, and that is a trigger for Ukrainians that Ukrainians will not agree to under no circumstances. Another demand of the Russians will be re-elections in Ukraine, at least the presidential re-elections, and most likely they will demand re-elections of the parliament as well. But again, when it comes to theoretically possible elections, we have to understand that Russia don't have their candidate for the time being. Basically, without their candidate, the potential candidate that may at least reach second tour, their bet will be on chaotization of internal processes inside of Ukraine. So basically, as we talk about the elections, which seem to be quite clear to everyone, in fact, it has quite serious stepping stones that will be embodied in different information campaigns in Ukraine by different proxy forces, including part of the Ukrainian politicians, we were presenting our study about who are the pro-Russian voters in Ukraine, and we have to understand that the maximum number of people who are ready to vote for pro-Russian forces does not exceed 15%. That's the maximum. I think that until elections, there will be only 10%. This is when it comes to the fact that Russia doesn't have either their candidate nor their party that may play as a golden share in the future parliament.
That's why if we do a prognosis, if an umbrella campaign will be taking place, it will be called "What Were We Fighting For?" This is will be equivalent to the 2014 campaign. They already started such campaign at the time. It was called "Did Maidan actually happen for this?" And this will be having signs of some new nuances. Also, we need to understand that the results of the negotiations in Alaska, Ukraine has already started to live in the logic of elections, and this in turn will increase the cases, the number of cases of informational warfare. And the Russians will keep actively interfere in the information field of Ukraine. What happens if the negotiations fail? Well, here we need to pay attention to what Witkoff and Putin discussed in the Kremlin. At the same time, Trump introduced the tariffs against India. For Trump, we need to understand that words are not really important. We need to observe what he is doing, what his actions are. So this action against India, it was a message. It was a message not only for Putin, but also for many countries that are working with Russia, that he will continue introducing sanctions if the negotiations with Putin will fail. In my opinion, in the failure case, Trump will introduce sanctions against against a number of countries. And on one hand, the possibilities for this exist. On the other hand, sometimes the political will is lacking. Also, the factor of China is very important because, and it's being discussed a lot lately. For Beijing, it is important that Russia starts moving towards peace, not in the framework of American Russian negotiations, but rather under the pressure from Chinese side. However, we need to understand that the Russian Federation is coming out of these negotiations. In the case of failure, Putin is making a huge step towards the transformation from technological vassal into political vessel of the Chinese Republic. And at this time, currently, China is the main investor of the Russian Federation. However, being investor without actually investing anything into the Russian economy. 50% of gold and a huge portion of platinum are imported by China from Russia. We need to understand that it's too early to talk about what Chinese steps will be, but we need to also to understand that the first time in the newest history, the Russian Federation lost its positive saldo, its positive income by the year, and started stagnating. also, the industry, the heavy machinery industry, and other related industries, they are really dependent. They are really dependent on Chinese technological advances, and only last year, the Huawei company, the Chinese company Huawei, won the contract for introducing 5G on the territory of the Russian Federation. And now we are seeing this transformation, and Putin understands this. This is one of the factors that influences the future steps of Putin. So regarding the red lines for Ukraine, this is what the Ukrainian society will be against, and what will be real situation in Kiev. Recognition of occupied territories legally, interdiction or of deliveries and the production of weapons and arms on the territory of Ukraine, and the introduction of the Russian language as a second state language. What if everything fails? Well, as always, in such cases, we understand that everything can change within an hour. So we need to just wait for the 15th August, which is not so long from here. And there is a few questions about this presentation. Do we understand correctly that the social opinion in Ukraine about religious law and NATO, they're not a red line? Well, regarding NATO, no, it's not. I'm pretty sure it's not, because Ukrainians, the majority of Ukrainians nowadays understand that NATO is out of question for the closest future. And regarding the religious question, it depends what exactly will be put on the table in terms of religion. And we know that religion in Ukraine stopped being Russian, basically. And now, in the recent months, like for example, in Chernivtsi, Ukrainian church wanted to enter to Chernivtsi, but they didn't manage to do it, and this will be an irritating factor. Okay, so the failure of the negotiations, in this case, will the USA continue the military aid? Yes, I'm sure they will continue the military aid, because the elections are soon due in the United States of America, and they cannot start their political campaign from this step of stopping the military aid for Ukraine. For us, the worst case scenario is unrealistic, which the 15th of August, we are waiting for it. So let's stop a little bit on it. What is the position of the United States of America will be there, and how important our presence there? Yes, it is very important that we are a part of these negotiations. As of today, as I understand it, the president of the USA, he will be pushing for this plan he has, and we will be kind of hanged in the vacuum until the last moment. However, what position does Trump have when going to negotiations with Russia? Even if they will be talking about the partial air ceasefire, this will be just one stage, stage of the negotiations. So Trump wants to stop the combat actions, the battle phase of the war. So the first step towards the stable peace, is it achievable? Well, Putin right now, what he's trying to do is to delay time, and he's been doing this from since the moment that Trump was inaugurated for the presidency. I will say again, the air ceasefire that everybody's talking about is going to be just the first step in those negotiations. So the biggest period is 30 days that Putin can gain. So, friends, colleagues, any questions, please? Yaroslav from Suspilne, thank you for this fundamental reporting, but I wanted to return to the beginning. This is a great phrase that American diplomacy does not decide problems. It's only balancing the powers. So, in your opinion, from the point of view of Washington and Trump, what we mean by the Washington is the decision-making centers. Do they see the balancing of Russia in this balance, or is there differences in views between Washington and Trump? Well, unfortunately, there is nowhere in the world except Ukraine and Baltic states that see another role of the Russian Federation. So basically what it means is that everybody seeing the Russian Federation is seen as a strong regional leader, and at that the one that is playing a significant role in the world in general and in the post-USSR space in particular. Any other questions? Andrei Makarenko, Embassy of Germany. This topic was raised many times before, but exit of the USA from negotiations. Is this a realistic or an unrealistic scenario for these negotiations, especially before the elections to the Congress? Well, we cannot exclude anything when we're talking about Trump. He's unpredictable, and from the point of view of logic of the election processes that start right now in the USA, this will be a huge blow against the Republican Party in particular, and US politicum in general. So I cannot exclude this. A little bit about the red lines. I wanted to ask you, do the Americans really have the understanding of what the red lines are for Ukraine? Do they take it into account? Well, I do hope that Witkoff, Kellogg has heard about these red lines in Kiev. About the measure these red lines will be taken into account by the United States of America, I think the main questions of these negotiations will be the removal of the sanctions. So the other questions will be secondary to that. Please. Another question, please. I will first tell my opinion. For Trump, this meeting in Alaska will be that it's going to be a deal. He wants to make a deal, and even the ceasefire will be advantageous for Putin. And it will open this economical cooperation between the U.S. and the Russian Federation that it will result in the removal of sanctions. So there is basically no interests of Ukraine that are being defended here. So for us, it's just a ceasefire basically, or freeze of the combat. This will be a treason of Ukraine and Europe by the United States. So what is the possibility of deciding their own problems there, which are not, which do not include peace in Ukraine? Well, it may sound paradoxical, but for Europe, it is also very important to remove to keep the sanctions. So Trump will have to coordinate the sanctions with Europe. So he cannot basically remove those sanctions or stop those sanctions without the consent of Europe. So the scheme that will be proposed in Alaska, I don't know what it's going to be. So we are waiting. We're waiting for the negotiations. Is Europe ready to take upon itself this significant role of going against Trump? Europe already demonstrated basically that they can go against Trump, and they showed many times that they can play, and they can play offensively. So the previous claims by the European Union leaders, by it's unified. The voice of Europe is unified. I would like to thank everybody who's here in this studio now, and Andrei Denysenko was with us. Thank you for this presentation. We also thank to our armed forces, and glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes.